Welcome back to the Plan Your Federal Retirement podcast. I'm your host, Micah Shilanski, and today we're going to talk about the Mirage, the money Mirage, the COLA Mirage, the thing that can potentially decrease your spending power, dare I say, rob you of future money if you are not planning for it correctly. And especially these last couple of years, we have seen this firsthand with our clients preparing to retire and our retirees, and we want to share with you some important things, not only how this works, but how you can avoid it. And so we're first going to go through the concept that we're talking about, how this is going to work, how it's affecting federal employees who are working, how it's affecting retirees. At the end of the podcast, we're going to get into some action items of what you can do to better prepare yourself for inflation, no matter how it's going to come. So with that, I've invited back on the podcast Luke, who's an advisor inside of our office. Luke's been an advisor for many years. He's joined our team this last year, and he brings a wealth of knowledge to the firm, which is fantastic. So Luke, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here, Micah.
So we were kind of pre-gaming and talking about this, and inflation is something that you and I, like financial advisors, right? We talk about all the time, way more than kind of the public sector does. Now the public is really interested in it because now they're actually feeling inflation, right? Now it's a real pain to them. So I think, Luke, we kind of kick this off with number one. Let's start with some definitions, because especially when we talk about COLA, right? COLA means different things depending on what type of COLA we're talking about, yet the word COLA is used kind of interchangeably. So let's talk a little bit about what COLA is, then let's talk a little bit of what inflation is, and then I'll kind of back us into then how does this work for retirees and for workers and things that we need to be thinking about. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Having that base knowledge to really understand how does this impact you as a federal worker, as a retiree, as somebody thinking about retiring? How do these factors play in? So I love that idea. Let's dive in.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to jump first on COLA, and let's talk about COLA and the unique aspect of COLA, for example, for people that live in Alaska or potentially some other areas. This is where COLA is different than locality pay. Right? Locality pay is you as a federal worker get an adjustment in your income, whether it's like the rough rate rest of the United States, or you have a special locality rate based on what the cost of living difference is based on where you're at versus the Washington, D.C., and you get paid a little bit for that discrepancy, right? And so that's the locality pay that you get is a taxable income. Then there's COLA, which fewer and fewer places get. Alaska can still get some of it depending on how you were set up. And you get a little bit of tax-free pay that comes in. They say, hey, that where you live, it costs a little bit more, so you might get locality pay as well as COLA. Alaska used to only get COLA, not locality pay. Then I'm pretty sure it was the Non-Foreign Area Equity Retirement Assurance Act back around 2010-ish, which transformed from COLA to locality pay. So workers in Alaska and some other places, Hawaii, et cetera, would then get that money, which then counts towards your high three, which is why people like it so much. So sometimes when you're talking about COLA, you're talking about some tax-free pay that you would get. But Luke, sometimes we use the other word COLA just to mean pay raises.
Right. So COLA can mean, cost of living adjustment, right? COLA is that acronym. So not only is it used when we're talking to our federal clients, federal employees that are clients, talking about their pay raises, but also for a lot of people, when they hear COLA, they think of Social Security. They think of the COLA that's applied to Social Security each year. Or as we know, our clients who are federal employees that are retired, they think of COLA when it comes to their FERS benefit, and they get a cost of living adjustment with FERS. So these multiple different areas where this COLA comes into play. So it's important to understand which one we're talking about, because they're not all the same, Micah. They're not all the same percentage. They're different for each of those. I know you know that, but yeah, COLA, different for each what we're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, right. So you have a COLA for working, you have COLA for COLA versus locality pay, you have a COLA for a pay raise, you have a COLA for retirees, you have a COLA for FERS, you got a COLA for special provisions, you got a COLA for Social Security. Those are all different. By the way, if you have a state retirement somewhere in there or a military retirement, that's also going to be different. So you have the same word, and the subset definition of all of this can be really different. Now, why this plays into effect and what is COLA supposed to do, right? Like a cost of living adjustment, let's take it from a retiree standpoint, is that it's supposed to help increase your pension, increase your retirement pay to keep up with inflation, right? To keep up with the cost of things going up over time. Now, this is where I get a little bit of my soapbox here, the difference in price increases versus inflation, right? We always kind of lump those up as the same definition, but I think there's a little bit of separation here. And this could be my soapbox because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is did things cost more or not? But the real definition of inflation, and Luke pushed back on maybe of a different one, is too much money chasing too few goods. Now, the only one who can increase money legally into our system is the government. So inflation generally is caused by an increase of money into the system created by the government. Luke, any pushback on that?
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, the government can do that multiple ways, right? They can decrease interest rates, right? That's what when you hear about the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, decreasing interest rates, really what they're doing is they're increasing the supply of money out there, or they're decreasing the supply of money out there to help control inflation. So if they want to increase inflation, they decrease interest rates. If they want to control inflation, deflate, they're going to increase it. So that's one big lever there.
Yeah, and it's a huge difference, right? I mean, the Fed moving a quarter point or a full point was something. Let's take a home mortgage, right? From home mortgage from a 3% to a 5% mortgage, that's a 2% increase. But we've seen that even higher than that, right? Now all of a sudden it makes it so much more expensive for someone to buy the home. So they're going to slow the market down. They're going to slow the economy down by making things more expensive. That's kind of the Fed's arm that they could do. The government can also, the Fed can also do this. The Fed can also increase how much banks can lend people money. Well, in a way, that's going to be increasing, right, the money supply, because if banks can only lend X amount, now it's X times 2. They can lend twice as much money that's out there. Well, now that's more money given in the system. It could be inflation by another programs created. The government's spending more money on different things. Now, this isn't a political podcast, right? So please don't be taking it that angle about what's good or bad. That's irrelevant, right? Our job is to look at this and say it is what it is. How does this affect retirees? Right. So Luke, you and I like looking at this on the financial planning side to give us, boy, no one can tell the future, right? But to give us some indication on what's going to happen. For example, when COVID really started to come out, we were really talking with our clients, hey, inflation's going to be a thing and we need to start planning for it. Now, we didn't have some magical crystal ball. It was super simple. The government is spending a ton more money. Eventually, we're going to have inflation. I didn't know by how much. I didn't know how long it was going to take for it to kick in. All of those things were an unknown, but it's like, hey, there's going to be a bill due with this at some point in time. How do we need to plan for it? So even though there's things that are outside of our control, that doesn't mean we should be oblivious to them. We should be aware of those things. And okay, I can't control inflation. I can't control government spending, like those things. I can vote, right? But then after that, it's kind of out of my hands. But what things can I do if I start to get worried about this?
You've heard this, I bet, many times from your clients, but a common question or concern that I've had over the last couple of years, especially, is what are we doing about inflation? Am I okay for inflation? Because we all go to the grocery store, right? We all go and buy things, and we're looking at the price tag, and then our retirees get their notice of their FERS increase for the year, and they go, hey, the price of groceries increased by X amount. My FERS benefit increased by a lot less than what I'm seeing at the grocery store. Am I still okay? Can I still do this? Because what do they have to do, Micah? They have to source those funds from somewhere else, right? Their FERS is what it is. FEHB, we're going to talk about that in a bit. Maybe those costs have also gone up, decreasing what they're getting from a net pay stub from their FERS pension, I should say, not a pay stub, FERS pension. But then they've got to source from elsewhere. So where do they source it from, Micah? They got to source it from their portfolio.
There's one of two places. They either have to cut their lifestyle, or what they have to do is they have to take more money out of their retirement savings. And the question is that a safe thing to do?
Right. Because if you're retired, you're not making more money at that point. So inflation is a really scary thing, because your portfolio is what it is, unless you are wanting to go back to work, or can go back to work, or can cut these expenses, like you said, in periods of high inflation. So it's something that I would encourage everybody listening to start thinking about before even retiring, because this is something that really impacts our retirees, is this inflation and planning for this inflation. How am I going to cover this potential increase to cost of goods while my FERS and my Social Security are going to be fixed during retirement, or pretty much fixed with a little bit of an freeze? Really important to start thinking about now.
Boy, Luke, I love that. So let's dive into the weeds a little bit more on this one. When we talk about inflation, when we talk about COLA, cost of living adjustments for retirees, let's talk about how that works. And so number one, let's say you're under the FERS retirement system. Now remember, right, there's one of three criteria you generally have to make in order to retire on a full and immediate pension. Be MRA, minimum retirement age, and 30 years of service. Be age 60 with 20 years of service, or be age 62 with at least 5 years of credible service for retirement. So if you met one of those early retirements, we can talk about those separately. But if you met one of those gates, the next thing that you're going to really see is when your cost of living increase affects your pension. And that doesn't happen until the year you turn 62. Now, why is this so important? Well, let's say you retired at 57 years young, and let's say your birthday was in January. You retired in January when you're 57 years young. There's no way pay increase that year, or at 58 or 59 or 60. At 62, after it's the December after you turn 62 is when that's going to kick in. Now it's like 5, almost 6 years later. Now you're getting this pay increase, which is coming. And Luke, is that cost of living adjustment? Is that retroactive? Are they going to say, oh man, Luke, I'm so sorry you didn't get that COLA for the last 5 years. We're just going to make all that up in one lump sum to you.
I think we all probably know the answer. It is not retroactive, unfortunately. So exactly, Micah, 5 years ago, that's when inflation really started to increase a lot.
Yes.
We've seen high numbers for inflation and high numbers for this COLA. So if you did retire at 57 5 years ago, you do miss out on a lot of these adjustments previous to 62. Now, I'm not saying don't retire before 62 because of this, but it's a factor to consider and make sure that you're working with a professional or that you have a really solid understanding of this, because that can really affect your retirement if you're retiring before 62.
So Luke, let's kind of walk through the numbers in here. So walk us through how inflation, so let's say you hit 62, you're under a normal FERS retirement. We're going to talk about revised annuitant, further revised annuitant, special provisions in just a second. So if you're just a regular FERS employee, once they determine the inflation amount, what do you get?
Yeah. So you if you're a federal employer or anybody out there, you probably see Social Security posting these COLA numbers, right? And so when they post these numbers, that's not what the FERS COLA is. So if Social Security comes out and says, you know what, this year, inflation, the COLA adjustment for Social Security is between 0 and 2%. Good news for FERS, it's the same percentage. 0 to 2%, it's the same percentage. But above 2% is where we hit this, what we call a diet COLA for FERS recipients, is that between 2 and 3%, FERS COLA is capped at 2%, right? So if it's 2.1%, you're going to get 2% for your COLA. If it's 2.9%, you'll get 2%. If it's 3%, you're still going to get 2%. Above 3%, it's a simple formula, just subtract 1 percentage point. So I believe it was 2023 or 2024, it was 8.7% is what the Social Security COLA was. The FERS COLA was 7.7%, one less, above 3.
So a diet COLA, right? What
Yes,
you get is a diet
COLA.
COLA. Like it could be close, right? But you're going to get less than inflation when you actually get it. That comes up. And you bring up a good point, right? About what is the inflation rate, et cetera. And this is all based on the consumer price index. I think it's a workers index that they're using. We can argue whether that's inflation or cost of living adjustment or not. That's irrelevant. That's how your pension is going to be adjusted. Now, if you're under the RAE, revised annuitant employee, or first FRA, further revised annuitant employee, or any of the changes that came under the 03BA, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, you're paying more for your pension, right? And that went into effect around 2013, 2014, right? And if you're paying more for your pension, however, your benefits did not change. So if you're under that, you still get COLA the exact same way. You still get it the same way as regular FERS, which is really nice. Your pension is calculated the exact same way, which is great. Now, if you are a special provisions individual, this is going to be a little different. The special provisions, generally this comes with a mandatory retirement. You're paying more into the retirement system because of your position. You have a mandatory retirement. This could be a law enforcement officer, a firefighter, ATC, etc. And if you're in that category, when you retire, you get a full COLA. And not only do you get a full COLA, it goes into effect right away. So you get the same COLA calculation as they do under CSRS. And you're going to get, that's the COLA calculation that you get. It goes into effect immediately when you retire. So if you retired at, 50 years old with 20 years of service, which under special provisions retirement, you can get your full pension, a supplement, and the COLA goes into effect the next year. So that is kind of nice. But even with that full COLA kind of coming in, that really doesn't keep up with the cost of changes that we see with our retirees over time, right? And Luke, if we go back to your example and we say, okay, imagine you went into retirement and your pension was $2,000 a month, right? And that's how much your kind of net pension was. And you go into retirement at 57. So Luke, from 57 to 62, is your pension going to go up or go down from that net $2,000 a month from 57 to 62?
So the important number is net, right? Because the gross is going to stay the same.
Yes.
The gross is going to stay the same. But what gets deducted from that? Well, FEHB is getting deducted from that FERS. And Micah, I think we talked about this earlier. I think it was 11.2 is the average increase to FEHB in 2025. Is that correct?
11.2% in 2025 was the average. Every plan is different, right? So I'm sure, but that is the average that OPM put out. Yep.
So let's say you retired last year and you were getting a net 2,000. Well, now you're going to get a little bit less than a net 2,000 because your FEHB went up potentially, right? That's an average. There's lots of plans, lots of different increases, but you're going to get less as a net pay stub. And Micah, did cost of goods and groceries and whatnot, did they go up this last year?
Geez, well, in Alaska, they sure as heck did, right? Now, when I go to the grocery store, it's like 2 little bags are like $200, right? It's $100 a bag. It's nuts.
Right. So your buying power, right? Your buying power of that FERS pension is definitely going down, especially if you're not getting that COLA each year. But I would argue, even if you are getting that COLA, there is a good chance that the buying power of that FERS pension that you're getting is decreasing just because of the factors we talked about. That is the COLA keeping up with inflation? I'm not sure. Is the COLA keeping up with FEHB inflation as well? I'm not sure. So that's why it's so important to have a plan for if these things happen in retirement, where are you going to source these dollars from if you don't have the flexibility of spending less to adjust for this increase to the cost of living and increase to FEHB?
Luke, you're spot on, right? And this also goes into the question about, Social Security at 62 as well, because Social Security is going to get some cost of living adjustment. Yes, it's calculated slightly different than your first pension is calculated. But do we turn on our Social Security at 62? Do we wait till our full retirement age between 66 and 67, right? Do we wait till 70 in order to turn on our Social Security? And I think inflation plays into this question with when to turn your Social Security on. I think it's going to play in a couple different ways. Number one, what's your cash flow, right? To your point, Luke, if you went into retirement at 57, now you're 62, the first supplement has gone away, your net pension has gone down for the last 5 years, right? Because FEHB has gone up, not quite double digits every single year, but it's gone up a lot over the last 5 years. So that premium is dramatically more than what it is now. And you feel you're taking the most out of your retirement account you safely can. Maybe we need to turn Social Security on at 62. Maybe cash flow is kind of the thing that says, no, we have to. Now, if you don't have to, now it becomes this rate of return kind of question we need to balance back and forth about. Does it make sense to delay our Social Security? And Luke, I know you and I, one of the reasons we like to delay our Social Security is we're using it as an inflation hedge. Because every year Social Security grows, you defer Social Security, it grows at rough numbers between 62 and your full retirement age, roughly it's about 6% a year is what it's going to increase. And then from your full retirement age to 70, roughly 8% a year it's going to increase. So if you're just looking at it as a percentage rate of return, okay, let's say inflation was 4%, but my Social Security, if I defer it, grows by 6%. Okay, maybe this is counteracting a little bit of that pension not growing as well if I'm choosing to delay that Social Security. Luke, am I on track with that, or is there anything it's kind of missing from there?
Totally. I think Social Security, as you know, there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of concern. Is it going to go away? Is it going to be the same as well?
Sure.
And the one factor that you didn't mention also with Social Security, to just tangent there real quick, is longevity as well, right? There are some people that say, my family has a history of longevity. They live to the hundreds. right? So maybe it makes sense to delay because then you're getting the biggest benefit that's going to increase over time and really hedge against inflation into your hundreds or your 90s. So that's also a factor too. But inflation, again, I said inflation, even with thinking about living long, you want to make sure that your benefit is keeping up with inflation as best as possible. So it may make sense to delay. A lot of great factors there to consider.
Yeah, so we have the FEHB increases that are taking place. You have Social Security that's going to be out there, et cetera. So we talk about all these things that are outside of your control, right? Okay, let's start talking about some things that are inside of your control. What can you actually do about this? No, we cannot individually control inflation. This is where I insert my one political joke. Please give me at least a sympathy laugh. The biggest problem with this administration, actually the same as the last administration, they don't return my phone calls. Like, I got great ideas, right? But they don't return my phone calls. All right. So since they don't, we got to go back to the things that you can control. What can we control? The TSP. Okay, sure, we can't control the investments. I'm not saying you can control the CS&I funds or any of the investments in there, but you can control your contributions. You can control your allocations. You can control if I'm putting money pre-tax or tax-free. You want to know a huge hedge for inflation? Beating the IRS out of tens of thousands of dollars in taxes, right? You want to transform inflation into your benefit, come up with a solid tax plan that you pay dramatically less in taxes. Well, that's just more net money to you. It's another tool in the tool chest to have you outpace inflation.
Exactly. And beyond the TSP, maybe you say, you know what, saving for the TSP it's maybe just not enough. Take a look at doing some Roth contributions, right? Take a look at your income, make sure that you can make a direct one or maybe a backdoor Roth. I would encourage you to work with a professional if you're unsure of those differences and how to invest those dollars, because that's not the TSP. You have to invest those dollars separately. It's a separate account, but that's a way to save. You can open a brokerage account and start building up dollars there as well. If the TSP, Micah, is not sufficient, you think, for retirement and supplementing the living costs that you're going to incur while retired.
Word of caution, just because you're working with someone that prepares your taxes does not mean you're working with a tax professional who does planning. These are different things. I'm not ragging on them at all. Like, we need people that prepare taxes and do a solid job of this. But Luke and I were working with a new client, and it was painful. It was just painful. I'm so glad they came in. They were transparent with their stuff. They showed us the things, but they didn't want to hire us in this previous year. They wanted to wait till this year in order to hire us. And if there's things we could have done in the previous tax year that we just missed, that cost the client tens of thousands of dollars in taxes, which I don't think is even close to an exaggeration, tens of thousands of dollars in taxes. And their very good CPA was very good at writing down historically what had happened and not planning for the future. And that's the difference in a tax preparer versus someone doing tax planning. A tax preparer is going to very accurately tell us what happened last year. They're historians. We need historians. It's required by law, right? We got to file taxes, but we also need planning. That's not required by law. The IRS does not mind if you overpay them in tens of thousands of dollars in taxes. That doesn't bother them. It bothers me. It bothers Luke. It keeps us up at night. But we want to make sure that you guys are taken care of. So it doesn't have to be us. It can definitely be somebody else. But that long-term tax plan, and Luke, I think it really comes down to it's not what the client knew they didn't know. It's what they didn't know they didn't know, right? They knew about some of their areas of ignorance is why they were coming to us to fill it in, but they had no idea these other things that they were missing because they've just never been educated in that. So these are areas you got to be really careful of.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. What you don't know can really hurt you, because like that client, they didn't know. They thought, we're doing the best thing, and they just didn't know that they were missing out on, literally tens of thousands of dollars of savings.
Yep. So super painful. Well, it's good. They're patriots, really paying down that deficit. So I do appreciate that. All right. Getting back to some action items, right? This podcast is all about action items. Our job, our goal is to help another 1 million federal employees with their retirement. We cannot do this without your help. So share this information, send it out there, help us with these algorithms to really blow this information up to federal employees. We really appreciate it because we want you to be able to transform your retirement. Luke, I'd say another action item for our listeners is to really have a plan that is set up to outpace inflation. But these things we can't control, we need to control our controllables. And we need to do some things to set us up at least the best foot forward to outpace inflation.
Couldn't agree more. And because we don't know what inflation is going to do in the future. We don't know what inflation is going to do if you're listening and thinking about retiring. The day you retire, who knows? But if you have a plan to protect and to hedge against this and to provide, if inflation is more than what your FERS is, then you can sleep well at night and you can go into retirement knowing that you have a plan for when this pops up.
Man, fantastic. All right. So that's the biggest things to think about is how inflation works, how it is going to affect you, how your COLAs work, come up with that individual plan. Luke, thank you so much for joining us. Boy, when we start these things, it's like 5 minutes into it. How are we going to talk about it? And 20 plus minutes later, we're like, oh no, we need to wrap this thing up. So it has been a lot of fun. We like geeking out on this stuff. And until next time, happy planning.
The content in Plan Your Federal Retirement is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered individualized advice. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal, and past performance does not guarantee future results. Guests are not affiliated with CWM LLC, investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Plan Your Federal Retirement is not affiliated with the federal government.